So in your last histology class, male reproductive system has been covered. So moving on to female reproductive system. So here we will be discussing about the microanatomy of uterus, ovary and uterine tubes. So as we all know, female reproductive system, they are located in the internal genitalia, they are located in pelvis. So we will be reading about the histology, how this structure looks like, uterus in its microanatomy, ovary as well as the fallopian tubes. What is the function of ovary? Gametogenesis. So it is containing eggs and ova. And there is production of hormones. If we see the gross structure of ovary, it is covered by the epithelium, mucosal layer and a connective tissue layer which is called as the tunica albuginea. Now histologically this has been divided into cortex as well as into medulla. So anything that is lying outside underneath the cuboidal epithelium, that is underneath the tunica albuginea, will be termed as cortex, and inner connective tissue that is containing the lymphatics, vessel, nerve supply will be in the medulla. So what does the cortex contains? It contains the different stages of oocytes. They are not in a single stage. They are from primordial follicle to the mature follicle, corpus luteum and corpus albicans. Everything is present in the cortex of the ovary. So it is very difficult to identify each and every structure. How the primordial follicle looks like, how primary follicle will look like, how a growing follicle will look. And these growing follicles, they are secondary follicles in multiple stages. This is an overview of the microanatomy of the ovary. So you all can see they are very round structures in the ovary. So these all you have to identify in ovary when you see the slide. You have to identify a primordial follicle till the corpus luteum and the corpus albicans. So this region is the cortex and this is the medulla, which is just containing the round structures that are capillaries, lymphatics and the nerves. So this is the medulla of the ovary, and this outer one, which are having mostly the circles, these are the ovarian follicles at various stages which are contained in the cortex. So starting from primordial follicle, how does this primordial follicle look like? What is the epithelium of a primordial follicle? So every follicle is containing the ova. So inside every follicle is having the ova, but outer side is differentiated. So here it is lying underneath the tunica albuginea and it consists of a oocyte and follicular cells. What is the epithelium of primordial follicle? So this is how the primordial follicles will look like. So this is the germinal epithelium, which is cuboidal epithelium. Then underneath that we have the oocyte, which is contained in the primordial follicle. The epithelium of primordial follicle is squamous epithelium. So this is covered with the squamous epithelium. So squamous epithelium lining containing the ova, it is the primordial follicle. Moving on to the primary follicle. The primary follicle, how you will differentiate it from the primordial? This will increase in size. Primary follicle will increase in size from the primordial follicle and the epithelium will also change. So primordial follicle enlarges, surrounding follicular cells, they will proliferate and become cuboidal to form the primary follicle. So it was squamous in primordial. Now they have changed to cuboidal to form a primary follicle, as well as they have increased in size. So there is a differentiation of the size also. It is having a layer which is zona pellucida. Then it has membrane granulosa cells which is called as stratum granulosum. These are also the cuboidal cells. Then the cells which are present in the surrounding, they will differentiate when they undergo the secondary follicle formation into the theca interna and theca externa. What is theca interna? They are the multiple layer of the cuboidal cells. What is theca externa? It is a connective tissue layer having the muscle layer also. So primary follicle and the primordial follicle, we can differentiate here. These are small in size, these are larger in size. They are all are at the same magnification, so you can differentiate the sizes of different follicles. So primordial follicle is changing to primary. So all the epithelium is going to the cuboidal side. So squamous से change होके ये cuboidal बन गया है, and these cells will become the granulosum layer, and these are now called as the follicular cells. And this is the oocyte contained in the primary follicle. Next is the secondary follicle. Now again it is increasing in size, it has changed the epithelium cuboidal. Now the multiple layers of the epithelium will occur. Till now single layer of epithelium was present, it was squamous, this was cuboidal. Now the multiple layer of the cells will be present. So these granulosa cells, they are multiplying. So the granulosa cells, they proliferate, and a fluid filled small cavities they will develop. All those small fluid filled cavities, they will form antrum. So one single cavity will be formed. So here we can see in the growing follicle we have different stages where we can see the multiple follicle cyst as well as the one single cyst. So here we have multiple layers which are divided into theca interna and theca externa. So here we have no multiple layers, here we have multiple layers, and those granulosa cells, they have differentiated themselves into the inner lining which is the theca interna and outer lining which is theca externa, and this is called as the antrum. Now with the formation of antrum, what will happen? This oocyte will be pushed to one side. So whole of the cavity will be formed inside the follicle. Now the matured Graafian follicle, the diameter is 10 millimeter. Now the primary oocyte has completed the first meiotic division to form the secondary oocyte with the expulsion of first polar body. Follicular antrum, which was formed in the secondary follicle, it is increasing in size, and the granulosa cells of cumulus oophorus surrounding the oocyte, they form a layer which is called as corona radiata. Now the oocyte which was pushed towards the one side because of the formation of antrum, now the cells around this oocyte, they are radially arranged. When they are radially arranged, it is called as corona radiata. So corona radiata, they are the form of the granulosa cells which are surrounding the oocyte and radially arranged. So here we can see the mature follicle or the Graafian follicle. So here we can see antrum, a large size antrum, which is a mature Graafian follicle, and a oocyte is pushed onto the one side with the layer of cells surrounding this oocyte. So it is higher magnification where you can see the radial arrangement of the granulosa cells of the theca interna which have arranged themselves radially. So all this you have to identify in the histological slide of the ovary. Now what is corpus luteum? After the expulsion of the ovary, expulsion of the ova, good morning, sir. किसके लिए सर? So at ovulation, the follicle collapses and its walls become the enfolded to form the corpus luteum. Now the cells of the granulosa which are still there and the theca interna layer, they are enlarging in size and they filled with the lipid pigment which is called as lipochrome. Now what are the content in terms of cells of the corpus luteum? They are granulosa lutein cells, theca lutein cells, and the granulosa lutein cells, they secrete the progesterone, while the theca lutein cells, they secrete the estradiol. So if the fertilization does not occur, this corpus luteum which was secreting the progesterone will undergo degeneration to form the corpus albicans. So the scar-like white structure is called as the corpus albicans. So you have the degenerated corpus luteum, then you have degenerated structure after the corpus luteum is the corpus albicans. So this is how the corpus luteum looks like, and this is the degenerated structure of the corpus luteum, which is fibrous. You can see the fibers and the degenerating cells over in the corpus albicans. Now this is the summary of the histology of ovary. What you have to see in the ovarian follicles: primordial follicle, primary oocyte, flat follicular cells, or you can say squamous epithelium. Primary follicle having the primary oocyte with a layer of zona pellucida, then the cuboidal follicular cells. After that, you have to see the growing follicles or the secondary follicles, which are having the primary oocyte and the granulosa cells, which have been differentiated into theca interna and the theca externa. Please mobiles अपने अंदर रख दो. Graphian follicle, which is a mature secondary follicle having the secondary oocyte, the first polar body expelled out. It is the oocyte is covered with the corona radiata cells, and it is called the cumulus ophorus. Then the corpus luteum. I'm once again repeating the structures that you will see in the cortex of the ovarian follicle. So here you will see the germinal epithelium, which is cuboidal in nature. Underneath that you have a cortex. Cortex is having the small round structures which are called as the primordial follicles. These primordial follicles, they are having the oocyte and they are covered with the squamous epithelium. So small round structures, they all are primordial follicles. Then they are growing in size and they are forming the primary follicles. So any follicle with the cuboidal epithelium will be called as the primary follicle. So here you cannot differentiate. It is so small that you cannot differentiate the epithelium of the two. Here they both are looking like same, but just you can see is the size differentiation. A little less in size are primordial follicle, and they have leveled the primary follicles, which are little larger in size, though the epithelium cannot be commented. Then moving on to the secondary follicle. So where is the secondary follicle? These are the secondary follicles. So here we can see the different sizes of the secondary follicles are there. So here you have a larger cavity, antrum is larger, and here the antrum is small. So it has been formed by the small fluid-filled cavities which is fused on later. So this is the antrum, which is larger in size, and this has pushed the oocyte to the one pole. So it is a oocyte covered with a granulosa cells, corona radiata we say when it is a Graafian follicle. So moving on to the Graafian follicle, here you have a big follicular cavity. So antrum is quite big, and you have a proper differentiation of cells of the granulosa. So this is the theca interna and this is theca externa. And the cells around this oocyte, they are radially arranged, which are called as the corona radiata. Then you have corpus luteum and the corpus albicans. So corpus luteum is vascularized and the cells are still can be easily differentiated. But in corpus albicans, it is a degenerated structure, so it is fibrous as well as it is having the degenerated structure. So these are can be seen by the size differentiation as well as the cells. So in the corpus albicans, you will not find the cells, but in corpus luteum, we can find the cells which are present in the corpus luteum, granulosa cells. And this is the medulla, which is having the connective tissue, capillaries, vessels, and the nerves, lymphatics. So this is the medulla of the ovary. So moving on to the next topic, fallopian tubes. Fallopian tubes or the uterine tubes. What is the purpose of the uterine tubes? To take up the ova, and it is a site of fertilization. So it is performing the different functions. So it is consisted of, as you have seen, any tubular structure. It is consist of mucosa, submucosa, muscular layer, and adventitia. So in GIT also you have seen the same thing. So starting with the mucosa, how the mucosa look like, it is multiple folds will be there in the mucosa of the ovary. So this is the foldings of the mucosa in the ovary. So when we see the histology, you will see multiple folded epithelium. This is the structure of the ovary. So it consists of thin longitudinal folds that are projected into the lumen, and these folds are more numerous in the ampulla. Now, what is the lining epithelium? So its function is to transfer the ova. So it has to have the, like in trachea, you have cilia. So similarly here it has to move the ova towards the fallopian tube ampulla. So here it is simple ciliated columnar epithelium. So it is columnar as well as ciliated epithelium. It is ciliated columnar cells as well as it is having the non-ciliated columnar cells. So non-ciliated columnar cells, they are called as the PEG cells. So PEG cells, this is very important question in the histology of the fallopian tube. What are PEG cells? They are non-ciliated columnar cells. They secrete the fluid, nourishes the spermatogonia and the fertilized egg. And this fallopian tube also shows the cyclic changes as the uterus. Last row, please stop smiling. Girls. So fallopian tube function bidirectional transport of the sperm, ovum and the fertilized egg. And clinical correlation for this is a very common site for the ectopic pregnancy. So this is the summary of the fallopian tube. It is a mucomuscular tube covered with the ciliated columnar epithelium and a non-ciliated columnar epithelium. Muscle coat, inner circular, outer longitudinal. Then serosal layer, it is covered with the peritoneum as it is a pelvic organ. So peritoneum gives it the covering, that is the tunica, outermost covering of adventitia. So here we can see the mucosal folds in the ovary, and this is the muscle layer. So inner one कैसी लग रही है? Circular. Outer one longitudinal. कैसा होता है? कहीं और भी होता है same? Inner circular, outer longitudinal. GIT. Whole GIT? ठीक है. This is a higher magnification of the mucosa where we can see the PEG cells which are non-ciliated, and otherwise whole is covered with the ciliated epithelium. So this is the picture how the mucosal folds, they are present here, and these are all ciliated. And this is the muscle coat. This is the slide. When you focus the slide, it will look like this on the 4x. Now coming on to the uterus. So uterus, it is in the different stages. So this histology has to be different in the proliferative phase and the secretory phase. So uterus is a muscular organ. Though lot of muscles will be present, but what we have to focus on here is the mucosa and the uterine glands of the uterus, which changes their structure. So uterus is divided into body, fundus and the cervix. So uterine wall has the 3 layers: endometrium, myometrium, perimetrium. So endometrium is important for us as the mucosal lining of uterus is endometrium. It is having the simple columnar epithelium. Uterine glands, they are simple tubular glands. What do you understand by simple tubular glands? क्लासिफिकेशन याद है किसी को? सिंपल ट्यूबुलर के अलावा और क्या होता है? ट्यूबुलो एल्वियोलर, ट्यूबुलो एसाइनर. So what are simple tubular glands? In any gland you have the secretory portion and duct portion. So in the simple tubular gland, where is the secretory portion? Where is the duct portion? So here the mucosa, it goes into the folds. It doesn't form any acini. Acini कहाँ form होते हैं? कौन सी glands में acini पड़े थे? Salivary glands में acini थे. Here you have the foldings of the mucosa, which is having the secretory part and the duct part. So part which is going downwards into the towards the submucosa folding inside will be the secretory part, and the crypt which is formed, it will be forming the duct part of the simple tubular glands. Then the myometrium is covered with the smooth muscle layer, and the perimetrium, it has the mesothelium covering. Mesothelium is the lining of peritoneum. So endometrium we have to discuss. These are having the three strata: strata compactum, strata spongiosum, and strata basale. So here we are going inside to outside. So inside you have compactum, then spongiosum, and outermost is the basale. So during the proliferative stage, there is the repair of the damaged endometrium occurs. So the glandular epithelium, it is proliferating. So glands, they become straight and they have a narrow lumen. So as we move on to the secretory phase, these uterine glands, they are becoming more coiled and more tortuous. So you can easily differentiate the structures of these glands. So during the menstrual phase, due to low levels of the estrogen and progesterone, the uterine glands which are twisted, they have the spiral arteries. The arteries, they also get twisted. They are called as the spiral arteries. Now they undergo constriction and result in the decreased blood supply, due to which the proteolytic enzymes they activate and the bleeding occurs. Now what remains in the three stratum of the endometrium, the epithelium and the stratum compactum, stratum basale, they remain intact because they are supplied by the straight arteries. Now this is the different stages of the uterine glands, how the uterine glands they become tortuous. So this is the post-menstrual phase. Now during the proliferative phase, this is increasing in size, and in the secretory phase, it has become the tortuous. Now what we were saying about the uterine gland, so tubular gland. So this portion which is going to be embedded towards the submucosa, this is called as the secretory part of the gland, and this portion is the duct part of the gland. So this is simple tubular glands which are formed by the folding of the mucosa. So this is the tortuous uterine gland. So if you see the slide of the uterus, what are these? Can you see this? These are simple tubular glands. They are just folding inside. These are uterine glands which are non-tortuous. While here, if you see, these glands are spiral in nature. They are making the S-shaped structure. So these are tortuous uterine glands. So these two structures you have to differentiate in the mucosa of the uterus. So endometrium, how does it look like in the proliferative phase? How it looks like in the secretory phase. These two stages you have to differentiate in the uterus. Now this is the difference between the endometrium during the proliferative and the secretory phase. You can go through this table once. What are the predominant hormones? How the endometrial thickness is different? Then which stratum is left? How uterine glands look like? Done?